Let me ask the audience for any questions. We're a little bit of a juncture here. We're going to go in a couple of different directions. Any questions? Yes, sir. Olin, why don't you take that one? Could you repeat the question?
Sure. The question, as I understand it, was around tandem and how prevalent that is within authorization systems in the payment space. We certainly, on the issuing side, are a big user of tandem. On the acquiring space, we're not. We run Unix-based systems. I think that for systems that are in place, I don't see a whole lot of change there. There's a huge investment. They work well. As people develop new authorization systems, I don't know that that's the place they'll go. In looking at acquisitions and being out in the market, a lot of smaller companies are doing that type of work, and they typically are not using tandem type processes or equipment. So, it's typically Unix based. It's multi location. You see a lot of them. They're more traditional Java based. JBoss, WebLogic type systems. So, but I can't see for existing systems that somebody would go back and make the investment to rewrite those because they work perfectly well.
Any other questions? Yes. John, you want to handle it?
It's an excellent question about skill availability for the legacy environment versus some of the new technology environments that we're looking at. And there's two answers to that. The first is we do look to some of our technology partners that we have, CTS and others, to help bring new skills to our organization. But what we've asked of them is different. So we would just ask them, go build this particular piece of technology. Now we want them to work with us in partnership so that we build it together. And that brings new skills and education to our internal teams as well. I think we've decided not to bifurcate our environment where we have our first data teams being legacy developers and support people and our support partners being our new development arm, but we've looked to mix those teams and get all of our people more involved. So we've been investing in education, in service architecture, new methodology and technology for our teams, and forcing, pushing, requesting, doing whatever it takes to have our partners bring us that education and seed of thought knowledge for new development efforts.
John, Mark, would you also handle that?
I think we're expecting more of our folks now. There was something that was interesting. There are folks that know the new technology, but you also discover that the folks that know legacy also know how systems need to be constructed to be industrial strength. And what we're having to do is mix some of these new folks. And we have folks that have used an iPad who come in and think they know how to do computer science and that's computer science, and it isn't, right? So it turns out that you have to mix the two. And what we've using WebSphere, but at the end of the day, introducing integrated development tools and making them use the new tools. In the end, if you're writing a piece of code in COBOL or you're writing it in Java, at the end of the day, it doesn't look really that much different. What's interesting is that we're expecting people to understand components that they did not build. So they're having to be integrators, and most of the folks haven't. Used to be, I could understand my component and stick to it, and I could work on that for 20 years, and there was no change. There's a lot of volatility in the componentry. People to be able to think about how they would integrate and source, kind of like people who've done assembly and manufacturing have thought. So that's a different kind of process. It requires mature and preventing this from happening. This has happened in other tools. It's just kind of driving that mindset. Yeah, we do have. So, for instance, a frustrating area for us, how about that, would be mobile. So developing for mobile handsets. Well, a lot of IDEs and environments are out there where we can develop one set of code and it will work with the plethora of changing handsets and tablets and all of that. So those are the things that we would look to do, because there is no way we would ever be able to keep up with the product release cycle of Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile, Sprint, any of those companies. So we have to look for architectural solutions, but there are a lot of good solutions out there, and I guess we expect more. We also talked earlier about, the system programmer is back. There are some things you expect the developers to do, and then there are folks that have to integrate all this stuff and keep an eye on where all this is headed. And you have to have people dedicated to that, and I know we like to invest in 4 development projects, and we don't need to have people invest in the civil engineering part of the computing, but it's really important, especially with all this change, because I don't anticipate the legacy bits going away. To me, it's like an airplane. An airplane can be in service for, 50 years, 40 years. Chances are the avionics system in it isn't the same one, we hope, that it was built with. But the skin's still there, the harness is still there, all of that, and, that's kind of what we're dealing with. No different than any physical plant in any other industry.
Okay, so let's, yes, in the back.
So unfortunately, the commercial bankers that tend to run financial institutions didn't go to marketing school and didn't learn about segmentation when they were learning to be commercial bankers. But you know what? Now, they kind of get it. I mean, if you watch and kind of look at the landscape of all of the great financial institutions that no longer exist just over the last 24 months, you could call it scared straight or whatever you want to call it. People are paying attention to that. To me, that this is no different than retailers or any other regular industry that have been client focused and had to understand their segments. So I believe there's a lot of opportunity, frankly. I mean, I think expectations that clients have about our products are not being set by the banks and what other banks are doing. They're being set by Amazon. They're being set by Google and by Apple and all of these other companies. And so that's what we have to kind of contend with. A lot of the systems that are out there, if they're merchandising systems or segmentation analysis systems, they've been out there for years. We are just now applying that, and we're beginning to see correlations. When we actually correlate it, we actually delight customers, which is something that's surprising, because I think it's been a lot harder for the bankers than it really needs to be. But there's a lot of stuff in it. The regulations are also driving a lot of perfection that may or may not be necessary, and they're also trying to drive product design, which will take flexibility out of the system and may kind of reduce financial services that you offer to end clients. So you hear banks fuss about that, and there's some stuff there that's probably warranted. Plus the tight timelines. I think it was, I don't know if it's Durbin, but some of the Dodd-Frank resolutions have been pushed out 6 months just because, I'm sorry, we are violating the law of physics there, and you can't get it all done in a month, just even though the law may say that. So those are things that we're concerned with. I don't think that there's any physical challenge to us. It's about mentally wrapping our business model around the fact that we're going to have to understand our clients, use that data thoughtfully, and then offer an actual package of products that are compelling to our clients.
Clearly, the pace of change is increasing with these quote-unquote opportunities. Let's jump ahead in terms of technology and kind of come back from the mobile world. Okay, so everyone's near field communications, and can I take my iPhone and do a transaction and things like that. These are new platforms. These are new technologies. You can either get there via the internet, or you can bypass the internet and just simply go from the mobile device, to do a deposit, take a picture of the check, do the deposit directly into the bank. So how are your organizations kind of dealing with that? John, you wanted to kick us off there?
Sure, I'll start. The change in the marketplace, and you have to understand why we invest in mobility or any other of the coming initiatives. So the market is changing. So there are new ways and new competition in the payment space. And when you take a larger picture, that has to drive your technology investment. So You just don't look at a specific technology and choose to invest in it. So mobility and mobile payments processing are just part of a change for us in looking at how people will use technologies in the future. And there are other technologies out there besides the mobile platform. Our initiative with some of our partners in the Google Wallet space and our TransArmor for data security, which is tokenized transmission, were all influenced by changes in that market. So we have an R&D program that looks across our product development spectrum and our market conditions around the globe, and that drives our investment in technologies.
Well, can you address the merchant perspective on this, too, in terms of the potential impact of new equipment to be able to field the transactions?
Well, in the merchant space, they have a legacy set of point-of-sale terminals that tie into their store systems, that tie into our payment systems. I think one of the things that we look at is how do we enable those terminals and that merchant equipment base to accept new and different types of transactions. Even the difference between the touch and go transaction and more PIN to SIG and SIG to PIN, depending on what part of the ocean that you're in. The technologies are changing. What we look at is how do we enable terminals to be more agile too. We've taken a service architecture approach there as well to do more server-based and push changes down to point-of-sale terminals rather than the old method of kind of a one-time replacement. So we're looking at the terminals as a new opportunity as well for enablement, and that's mainly going to be a kind of a publish and subscribe type technology that we'll use with our terminal base.
Olin, would you take that one next?
Sure. So I think there's a bit of a model for us already. We support approximately 1,500 value-added resellers that integrate from a POS perspective into our environment. So that could be a terminal manufacturer. It could be a software house that, an example, many of you may be familiar with Squirrel, which is a restaurant-based piece of software. So we're accustomed to dealing with a lot of change and a lot of different types of terminals and interactions. I think the challenge will be that a lot of merchants don't want to change. We have merchants that have terminals that are 5, 10, 15 years old, seems like, and they're accustomed to that. It's hard to sell them on taking the time to change out. I think as customers demand it, they will. So if you get to an NFC or a chip-based challenge where X number of customers that come in the merchant location can't use their card because MagStripe is not an option, that will force change. But I think like anything in the acquiring space, when it has to deal with a terminal, you've got a huge population of people that you have to change. It's not like an internal system where you make a change and it affects everybody. So it's kind of an uphill battle there. But mobile, I think, is just another extension of that. We today support iPhone and BlackBerry, in the process of doing Android, but that'll become just another point-of-sale device from our perspective. Maybe some different uses and a different market there. We're focused on verticals that maybe are not traditional, people that are in the service business and go out to people's homes, so having a traditional terminal is not viable for them, or people that traditionally have not taken cards. They've been a cash-only type of business. So it'll change things. But I think from our perspective, it's something that investing in mobile will not have the short-term payback, but you got to go do it because it's where things will go eventually.
Right. So have you got a kind of a cadence by which you're going to go towards mobile from a planning or an architecture perspective?
Yeah, so I think that's what we've realized is that's the number of devices and the number of operating systems is not going to slow down. So actually devoting a certain amount of time to just that cadence of, okay, something new is going to come out next month is the direction we're going. It's not going to be a one and done, okay, I've done iPhone now. I'm finished. You know.
Rajiv, from your unique perspective in the analytics and things like that.
First, I think I see how mobile devices can be just an extension of channel, but I think there are other opportunities that will emerge, and not all of it is fully understood. But look at how we interact with our iPhone. All these times banks were putting up their websites, pushing all their customers to go to online banking, costs are much lower, etc., etc., etc. But look at how we interact with the internet today. Just the other day, browser was the only way we ever touched internet. How many of you iPhone users open up your Safari app? My guess is you probably, once in a while, if you can't find out an app for it, your app is integrated into the internet, right? You don't know, but your app, when you are interacting with that app, it's no more just an application. It's the application and the internet access together, right? There is an opportunity there. I haven't yet quite figured out what it is. Second is going back to Mark's point about segmentation. Look at a mobile device, and how many different ways can you now get more information about the customer? First, if it was my Bank of America or SunTrust account, all I needed to give my wife is my user ID password. She could go check the balance if the check has cleared, etc. How many times is my wife carrying my iPhone? I mean, that device is 99% of the time used by this person, as opposed to online access. It could be me, it could be my wife, or anybody who I give password access to. There are other things you can gather, for example, location, which my belief is there'll be regulation around privacy issues around that sooner than later. But where I think the challenge and the risk is for banks, which by the way is an opportunity for me, as always I have some software to sell to somebody, there is a huge security issue over there. You can't open up a Wall Street Journal today without one report of a breach, right? Just yesterday, ADP was reported. Today there's a front page article on the various breaches that has been happening. Lockheed Martin, ADP, name the company, and they have somebody, somewhere or the other, they have reported a breach. I think mobile devices make that danger manifold times more. I mean, you can easily hack when you just upgrade your app, that I will put a piece of software that can steal the passwords, that can notice where all you are going. I mean, for every power brings a possibility of abuse. I think the IT organizations have to figure out, hopefully with me, what are the levels of analytics and software that needs to be put in these devices just to do that fraud mitigation and the risk analysis.
So, Mark, are you willing to work with Rajiv?
He actually has bought 3 products.
So, from your perspective, it's kind of interesting because you have to appeal directly to the consumer in this case. And is it Generation Y really pushing you?
Okay. So there are a couple themes running through here. So first of all, on mobile. So we may not have been as fast as other institutions. We have our mobile channel up. We're making a lot of investments in it. What you see is there are a lot of people at home that really don't want to fire their desktop up. I don't think they have desktops anymore. They don't want to fire up their browser on their desktop to get to the internet. They are using the mobile device. In order to do mobile, we had to do registration, which finally solves the problem, giving our institutional customers tokens from RSA, which were breached anyway, right? And giving them something else to have to carry around, which they really didn't want to do. Now they really want their phone, so we've solved that problem, and we've already integrated registration in there. I don't know if you've heard about Zeus. It's a little thing that allows you to it gets onto the client computer so that they're running treasury and payments or wire processing. Basically, it can do keystroke sniffing and all of that, and even if they had the RSA token and even if they had all of the secure lines, people could kind of hijack that session and divert wires. And the only way to solve that problem is when some wire transaction's coming down and it looks like the endpoint's Romania and these people haven't actually conducted business with that IP address or Romania before, perhaps we should stop it. Well, so that's wire. Now it goes down to ACH. ACH is a lot cheaper, automated clearinghouse transactions. I mean, for a wire, you get paid $30. ACH is a nickel, right? So it's quite clear that we're going to have to do that pre-processing before posting, and we're putting systems in to do that. And that will solve some of this mobile thing. But what it means is, you know, banks, commercial banks are all about total borrower exposure, especially lately. They're also going to be about total exposure to payers, people who pay money and use the bank, which are the primary products that we want because we want to be funded by those deposits, and that means people are using it to pay things. And then I'll make a comment about remote deposit capture, which is interesting. So I'm a transaction guy, you know, one item, one transaction, atomic properties. This mobile taking pictures of checks is great, except for the following things. So somebody takes a picture of the check, then takes the check and sticks it on their blotter. And then 3 weeks later, when the dust settles on their desk and they have this check sitting there and they have no indication of whether or not they've done it. So you know what they do? They snap another picture of the check and submit it again. So that means all of the things that we had to do before, we have to do now, except you don't know when that second duplicated transaction happens. This happened when we went to image clearing, and in order to kind of get people over the hump, we had image replacement documents. So you would take an image, and then on the endpoint, somebody would print out a copy of it, and then they would run that through the paper process. And unfortunately, that allowed transaction duplication. The net of all this means is we're going to have to kind of have an understanding of a payment history that clients do based on what they do. We're going to have to look at that data, and then we're going to have to authorize based on that. So someone asked a question earlier about tandem and authorization. If I have to authorize on that, I'm not going to be building that on base 24 and tandem. These are systems I'm going to have to build, right? And these are systems that we are building. And so in the next 5 years, I would see that kind of thing going on because of what we see happening in this market.